when the first rays of September cut through the Caribbean Sea, no one imagined that attack would change everything. In the darkness of international waters, an American destroyer positioned its weapons against a Venezuelan vessel, preparing for a moment that would alter the course of geopolitical history. September 2, 2025, 300 hours. The night's silence would be broken by a military operation that would transform 11 lives into mere statistics of a conflict about to erupt. Each second carried the tension of a decision that could trigger a total war. A single movement would be enough to drag two nations into an unprecedented confrontation. The American destroyer, with its war systems ready, represented more than a simple military unit. It was the trigger of an escalation that no one expected, but everyone feared. War was beginning before dawn. The southern Caribbean waters transformed into a battlefield on the night of September 2, 2025, when the United States Navy executed a precision airstrike that would become a pivotal moment in international relations. At precisely 3 o'clock local time, the darkness was shattered by a calculated military intervention targeting a Venezuelan maritime vessel. The sea's surface, previously a canvas of tranquility, erupted into a violent spectacle of military might. Advanced naval assets, meticulously positioned in strategic locations, launched a coordinated attack that would send shockwaves through diplomatic channels. Radar systems tracked the incoming strike with cold, mechanical precision, converting the peaceful maritime environment into a theater of geopolitical confrontation. The vessel, sailing under Venezuelan colors, became an unexpected focal point of international tension. Intelligence reports suggested potential narcotics trafficking, though concrete evidence remained elusive. The night air filled with the low rumble of approaching missile systems, a sound that would forever change the relationship between the United States and Venezuela. Satellite imagery, electronic signal intelligence, and real-time surveillance converged to create a targeting solution that would prove devastatingly effective. The maritime domain, traditionally a space of international commerce and peaceful navigation, suddenly became a battlefield where technological superiority would dictate the terms of engagement. The attack's execution revealed the sophisticated technological capabilities of the U.S. military, specifically designed for surgical maritime interventions. Tomahawk cruise missiles, the pinnacle of precision strike technology, traversed the dark Caribbean waters with extraordinary accuracy. Each missile represented a complex system of guidance, powered by advanced navigation technologies that could navigate through challenging maritime environments with minimal detection. The strike team had meticulously planned every operational detail, leveraging an intricate network of intelligence-gathering mechanisms. Satellite reconnaissance, signals intelligence, and real-time data fusion created a comprehensive targeting package that transformed a potential maritime threat into a military objective. The missile's trajectories were calculated with mathematical precision, accounting for sea state, atmospheric conditions, and potential defensive systems. Thermal imaging systems provided real-time tracking, while electronic warfare capabilities suppressed potential communication and radar systems that might interfere with the mission. The technological symphony of modern naval warfare played out in the darkness, with each system working in perfect harmony to deliver a decisive strike. The vessel's defensive capabilities, if any existed, were rendered obsolete by the overwhelming technological superiority of the attacking force. In the strike's aftermath, the immediate and long-term consequences began to crystallize with brutal clarity. 11 lives were abruptly terminated, their identities obscured by the complex layers of military operations and conflicting narratives. The U.S. administration, led by the Trump team, immediately presented a narrative of counter-narcotics operations, alleging the vessel was operated by members of the Tren de Aragua gang and involved in extensive drug transportation networks. However, the conspicuous lack of public evidence left a significant void in the official account. Venezuelan authorities responded with immediate and vehement condemnation, describing the attack as a flagrant violation of international maritime law and national sovereignty. The diplomatic landscape transformed instantaneously, with tensions escalating from diplomatic rhetoric to potential military confrontation. Rescue operations remained uncertain, complicated by the chaotic aftermath of the strike and the rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. debris scattered across the water's surface, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of military intervention. Each fragment told a story of lives interrupted, of a moment that would potentially reshape international relations. The Caribbean Sea, traditionally a region of complex but relatively stable interactions, now stood on the precipice of a potential broader conflict. Questions emerged that would challenge diplomatic channels, international law, and the delicate balance of power in the region. The first hours following the naval attack transformed into a whirlwind of military and diplomatic activity that quickly revealed the complexity of the confrontation between the United States and Venezuela. The U.S. Navy activated immediate response protocols, mobilizing rescue units and intelligence operations to assess the damage caused by the attack. Specialized search and rescue helicopters flew over the incident area equipped with advanced thermal scanning and high-resolution radar systems. These equipment sought to identify possible survivors, collect evidence, and conduct a first tactical analysis of the attack site. Military communications entered maximum alert status, with encrypted communication channels transmitting real-time information between ships, land bases, and command centers. High-ranking officers held emergency meetings, analyzing each detail of the attack and preparing detailed reports for the chain of command. Military intelligence systems immediately began processing and analyzing all collected data, seeking to confirm or refute the initial claims about the Venezuelan ship. Specialized signals intelligence teams began dissecting every information fragment, using sophisticated data processing algorithms to extract significant insights from the incident. Venezuelan authorities reacted with a speed and intensity that surprised international observers, transforming the attack into a matter of national honor and sovereign security. Nicolas Maduro immediately convened an emergency meeting with his military leadership and political leaders, declaring the attack a direct aggression against Venezuelan national interests. Diosdado Cabello, a prominent figure in the government, initiated an aggressive media campaign publicly questioning the version presented by the United States and demanding international investigations into the incident. Venezuelan armed forces entered maximum readiness, with military units being quickly redistributed to strategic positions along borders and coastal regions. Civil militias were summoned and began receiving mobilization instructions, creating an atmosphere of preparation for a possible broader conflict. Venezuela's foreign ministry initiated a series of diplomatic communications, activating international allies and requesting emergency meetings in organizations such as the UN and OAS communication channels with allied countries such as Russia, China, and Cuba were intensified, seeking to build an international support base against what they considered to be a North American aggression. The official Venezuelan narrative emphasized the violation of international law principles and presented the attack as another example of U.S. military interventionism in the region. The international community began to react to the incident with a mixture of concern, caution, and geopolitical expectation. Latin American countries immediately began to assess the possible implications of the attack, fearing an escalation of tensions that could destabilize the already fragile Caribbean region. International organizations such as the UN and OAS initiated internal discussions to determine an official position on the incident, carefully analyzing the versions presented by the United States and Venezuela. Military observers and geopolitical experts began publicly dissecting every known detail of the attack, seeking to understand the strategic motivations behind the North American military action. Chancelleries around the world entered a state of alert, with diplomats exchanging information and evaluating the possible developments of the conflict. Countries with economic and strategic interests in the Caribbean region began to closely monitor the development of the situation, preparing for possible escalation or mediation scenarios. International media outlets devoted extensive coverage to the incident, with detailed analyses, expert interviews, and reports seeking to unravel the backstage of the naval attack. Global intelligence networks intensified the collection and analysis of information, seeking to understand subsequent military and diplomatic movements. Diplomatic tension increased with each hour, with every statement, military movement, and specialized analysis adding new layers of complexity to the already delicate international scenario. The Venezuelan military mobilization reached levels of complexity and intensity never seen in recent decades, rapidly transforming the regional geopolitical landscape. President Nicolas Maduro ordered the immediate deployment of 25,000 troops to border and coastal zones, creating a strategic defense belt around the national territory. Military units from different branches were summoned, including land, naval, and air forces, each receiving specific positioning and readiness instructions. Military communication systems entered emergency operation mode, with encrypted communication networks interconnecting military units throughout the country. Advanced command centers were established at strategic points, allowing rapid and efficient coordination between different military units. Armored vehicles began to be deployed to coastal regions, especially in Zulia and Táchira provinces, creating advanced defense points. State-of-the-art radar systems were activated, constantly monitoring air and maritime spaces for any suspicious movement. Venezuelan armed forces implemented asymmetric warfare protocols, preparing for various potential confrontation scenarios with the United States. Elite units were positioned at key points, ready to quickly respond to any potential provocation or attack. Venezuelan civil militias received a fundamental role in the national defense strategy, being rapidly mobilized and organized into territorial defense units. Diosdado Cabello, a high-ranking political leader, personally took over the coordination of paramilitary groups, providing training and guiding the preparation of civilian units. Thousands of volunteers were quickly trained in civil defense tactics, receiving basic equipment and instructions on emergency procedures. Schools, universities, and community centers were transformed into training and mobilization nuclei, creating a decentralized territorial defense network. Paramilitary groups receive specific instructions on urban and rural guerrilla tactics, preparing for possible invasion or prolonged conflict scenarios. Parallel communication systems were established, allowing militias to maintain communication even in case of official system interruption. The Venezuelan government quickly invested in emergency communication equipment, distributing radios and alternative communication systems to civilian units. The population was mobilized through a strong patriotic discourse that emphasized the need to defend national sovereignty against external aggression. Television and radio programs constantly transmitted messages of unity and preparation, creating an environment of national mobilization. The international dimension of Venezuelan mobilization gained complex and strategic contours, involving a sophisticated network of diplomatic and military allies. Countries like Russia, China, Cuba, and Nicaragua began to demonstrate explicit support for the Maduro government, sending diplomatic and military solidarity signals. Russian military advisors were quickly mobilized to assist in defense strategy, sharing asymmetric conflict experiences and providing technical advice on possible confrontation scenarios. Russian air defense systems and military equipment began to be discussed as possible logistical support for Venezuela. China, in turn, signaled economic and diplomatic support, preparing for possible international sanctions or embargoes against the Venezuelan government. Venezuelan embassies worldwide initiated an intense diplomatic campaign, seeking to build narratives that portrayed the U.S. attack as an unjustified aggression. International organizations such as the Non-Aligned Movement and ALBA, Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, were mobilized to condemn North American military actions. Geopolitical experts began to analyze the possible developments of the conflict, discussing scenarios that could involve military escalation or diplomatic resolution. The international community closely observed every movement, with diplomats and military analysts seeking to understand the real intentions behind the Venezuelan mobilization. The international community reacted to the naval attack with a complex and meticulous geopolitical assessment strategy, transforming the incident into a global interest case. The United Nations quickly convened an Emergency Security Council meeting, where representatives from different countries began to carefully analyze the circumstances of the confrontation between the United States and Venezuela. Diplomats from global powers such as China, Russia, the European Union, and Latin American countries initiated intense consultations to determine a joint position on the conflict. global intelligence systems entered maximum vigilance, intercepting and analyzing diplomatic and military communications related to the incident. Geopolitical analysis centers in universities and think tanks worldwide began producing detailed reports on the possible implications of the attack. International conflict monitoring organizations mobilized specialized teams to collect information and document each diplomatic and military movement. Communication channels between chancelleries were intensified, with ambassadors being summoned for emergency discussions in capitals around the world. Satellite surveillance systems increased monitoring of the Caribbean region, seeking to detect any additional military movement. Digital communication networks transformed into spaces of analysis and speculation, with international relations experts sharing real-time insights about the conflict's development. Latin American regional organizations assumed a crucial role in mediating and analyzing the conflict, convening emergency meetings to discuss the potential geopolitical consequences of the naval attack. The Organization of American States, OAS, initiated a diplomatic investigation process seeking to establish the facts behind the incident and evaluate the claims presented by the United States and Venezuela. Countries like Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia began to articulate a joint diplomatic position, seeking to prevent a military escalation in the region. South American government representatives conducted discreet consultations to assess possible conflict development scenarios, considering the economic and strategic impacts of a potential war. Regional intelligence systems intensified monitoring of military and diplomatic movements, preparing detailed reports for their respective governments. Universities and international relations research centers mobilized teams of experts to analyze every aspect of the confrontation, producing complex geopolitical analyses. Conflict resolution mechanisms such as the Rio Group and UNASUR were reactivated to seek a peaceful diplomatic solution. Communication channels between regional leaders were intensified, with discreet conversations seeking to prevent military escalation. Human rights organizations began monitoring the situation, concerned about potential humanitarian impacts of an armed conflict. The global dimension of the international response gained complex and strategic contours, involving a sophisticated network of diplomatic and military actors. Powers like Russia and China signaled support for Venezuela, preparing for possible containment measures against the United States. Russian military advisors increased their presence in Venezuelan bases, providing technical and strategic support. The Chinese government initiated discussions about possible economic sanctions and logistical support for Venezuela using discreet diplomatic channels. International organizations such as the UN began mobilizing mediation teams, seeking to establish a dialogue that could prevent military escalation. International law experts initiated detailed analyses of the legality of the North American attack, questioning the legitimacy of the military action in international waters. Global intelligence systems intensified monitoring of military and diplomatic communications, seeking to anticipate possible strategic movements. Geopolitical analysis centers worldwide produced complex reports on the potential conflict developments, considering scenarios ranging from diplomatic resolution to a possible direct military confrontation. Digital communication networks transformed into spaces of debate and analysis, with experts sharing real-time insights about the nuances of the international conflict. The United States military capabilities revealed themselves significantly superior in all operational aspects, creating a fundamental strategic imbalance in the potential confrontation with Venezuela. The USS Iwo Jima amphibious group, strategically positioned in the Caribbean, transported approximately 4,500 highly trained Marine troops, representing an extremely sophisticated military projection force. 8 warships, including destroyers equipped with Tomahawk cruise missiles, a rapid attack nuclear submarine, and a guided missile cruiser, formed a virtually uncontestable naval force chord. The U.S. Air Force had deployed 10 stealth F-35B fighters in Puerto Rico, along with MQ-9 Reaper surveillance drones, ensuring air superiority and unrestricted monitoring capacity. Electronic warfare and military communication systems of the U.S. allowed instant tactical coordination between different units and platforms, creating a highly integrated combat network. Military reconnaissance satellites constantly monitored Venezuelan territory, providing real-time precision intelligence. Cruise missiles with the capability to hit targets more than 1,500 kilometers away guaranteed an attack capability without the need for physical proximity. North American technological superiority created a scenario where Venezuela would be quickly neutralized in any direct confrontation. Venezuela, despite its technological limitations, prepared an asymmetric defense strategy based on guerrilla tactics and territorial resistance. The country mobilized 25,000 troops to border zones with special concentration in Zulia and Táchira provinces, creating significant defensive density. Civil militias were organized into territorial defense units, receiving basic training in urban and rural guerrilla tactics. Russian anti-aircraft defense systems, such as the S-300, were secretly positioned at strategic points, representing a potential threat to invading aircraft. The Maduro government counted on logistical and diplomatic support from allies like Russia, China, and Cuba, which could provide strategic support in case of prolonged conflict. Paramilitary groups were organized to execute decentralized resistance tactics, capable of operating independently even after the potential destruction of conventional military structures. Alternative communication systems were established, ensuring coordination capacity even in scenarios of traditional infrastructure disruption. The Venezuelan strategy was based less on direct confrontation and more on wear and resistance, potentially transforming the entire national territory into an asymmetric conflict zone. The prospective scenarios for a possible military confrontation presented complex and multidimensional variables that went far beyond a simple conventional confrontation. International military analysts identified at least 3 possible escalations: a limited surgical intervention, a medium-intensity conflict, or a prolonged war with insurgency characteristics. In the first scenario, the United States could conduct targeted attacks against Venezuelan military infrastructure, using precision capabilities to neutralize defense systems without territorial occupation. The second scenario would imply a more extensive military operation, potentially including troop landings and temporary occupation of strategic regions. The third scenario represented the most complex, where Venezuelan resistance would transform the conflict into a war of attrition, with militias and paramilitary groups executing guerrilla actions against occupation forces. Regional geopolitical factors would be decisive, with countries like Russia, China, Cuba, and Nicaragua potentially providing diplomatic and logistical support to Venezuela. The participation of international organizations, such as the UN and OAS, would be crucial to establish mediation mechanisms and eventual de-escalation. The role of international public opinion, particularly in Latin America, could significantly influence the conflict's developments, pressuring for diplomatic solutions and avoiding total military escalation. Military communication protocols between the United States and Venezuela reached an unprecedented level of tension, with emergency communication systems being activated on both sides. Strategic command centers in the U.S. entered maximum alert status, with encrypted communications being instantly transmitted between military units in the Caribbean and decision-making centers in Washington. High-ranking officers held emergency meetings every hour, evaluating each movement and possible confrontation scenario. Military intelligence systems processed real-time data, analyzing troop movements, intercepted communications, and possible strategic intentions. Reconnaissance satellites constantly monitored Venezuelan territory, providing high-resolution images of military positions and troop movements. Communication protocols between military units were intensified, with emergency channels being constantly checked and updated. Specialized electronic warfare teams prepared for possible confrontation scenarios, developing strategies for suppressing enemy communications and protecting their own systems. The technological tension was palpable, with each communication and intelligence system working at the limit of its capabilities to anticipate possible opponent movements. Venezuela organized its defense strategy with a combination of military preparation and popular mobilization, transforming the potential conflict into a matter of national survival. Civil militias were fully mobilized, receiving final instructions on positioning and preparation for resistance scenarios. Diosdado Cabello and other military leaders held secret meetings with commanders of strategic units, defining response protocols for different attack scenarios. Anti-aircraft defense systems were repositioned, creating a complex defensive network around points considered critical to national security. Communication channels with international allies such as Russia, China, and Cuba were intensified, seeking to ensure logistical and diplomatic support in case of direct confrontation. Radio and television programs transmitted constant messages of national unity, psychologically preparing the population for a possible conflict. Paramilitary groups received specific instructions on decentralized resistance tactics, capable of operating independently, even in scenarios of total disruption of conventional military structures. Venezuelan society seemed to transform entirely into a war machine, with each citizen potentially preparing for a role in resistance. The critical moment revealed itself as a delicate balance between diplomacy and potential military confrontation, with each movement carrying potentially catastrophic consequences. International observers meticulously followed each detail, aware that a single mistake could trigger a conflict of unforeseeable proportions. International organizations such as the UN and OAS multiplied diplomatic efforts, seeking to create negotiation channels that could prevent military confrontation. Latin American regional leaders initiated discreet mediation rounds, trying to create dialogue bridges between Washington and Caracas. Geopolitical analysis centers around the world produced complex reports, evaluating each possible scenario and its global implications. The international community observed with growing concern, aware that the conflict could quickly extrapolate regional limits and transform into a large-scale international crisis. Global intelligence systems monitored each movement, each communication, each military positioning, seeking to anticipate and understand the true intentions of both sides. The world seemed suspended in a moment of absolute expectation, aware that the next step could mean peace or war.